Hello, I'm Scott Osborne, and this is part of the Women's Resource Center's Elevating Women's Voices campaign. We're talking about a variety of gender equality topics, and today I'm here with my good friend Jason Vasilakis. We're going to be talking about how men see some gender equality issues. So welcome.
Thank you.
So before we get into that, I wanted to say a little bit more why I wanted to have this conversation, because we talk a lot about women's issues and gender issues, but we don't exist in a vacuum, in a silo, and it's so important to hear other perspectives. And I've done a lot of research on men and masculinities, but I know you have a lot of thoughts and you've talked to a lot of men in your life, and it would really be great to hear just from you. So first, though, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name's Jason Vasilakis, and I live up in St. Petersburg. I started out my career in the business world. I worked in banking, and then in my 20s moved out to San Francisco and worked for some nonprofits out there. And then I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, and I went back to school, and now I'm a therapist. So
interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So
okay.
I've been working the last 20 years as a therapist.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I know I'm going to say we're going to be talking a lot about sort of generalizations, how men and women are socialized, but we both know that does not refer to everyone. There are many, many exceptions, but there are still very strong social norms that we all experience that men and women do, and we've talked about that before. So let's dive right in. There's a lot of talk about changes in traditional gender roles. We know women feel that, in the past 50 years, which is the blink of an eye, women's roles have changed immensely. So tell me a little bit about how you think men's roles have changed and what you're hearing or seeing about that.
Yeah, I mean, I can start with myself and my own history around that. I was born at the beginning of Gen X, so, eventually got to that, all right, how can we be different than the boomers, kind of thing. But my first 18 years, very traditional, father worked, mother stayed at home, a lot of this, boys don't cry, was into sports, and then when I went to college was the first, starting to hear more about looking at, gender and some of the change.
People probably didn't even talk about gender, though.
Yeah.
I don't remember people talking about it specifically, or did they?
Yeah, I mean, there was more like women were taking, women's studies and some of the changes that were happening, and it was kind of exciting, but it was also, looking at it, observing it from, oh, I wonder what, this is good, this is happening, but I have no clue what's going on, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it was kind of okay, and then I graduated from school, and I worked, like I said, in finance, and in Boston, I worked for a bank, and my first 3 bosses were females, so it was kind of like, oh, change is happening, this is good. But then when you kind of notice, it's like, all the CEOs were white males, and there definitely was that, glass ceiling, and big decisions were made by men. So it still had that feel to it. And then when I went to San Francisco and kind of worked for nonprofits, I really started to say, all right, now I'm embracing my Gen X-ness, and there's going to be change here. And people were definitely talking about gender and sexuality, and a lot of things were being discussed, but there still was a little bit of, I don't really know what I'm doing here. There isn't really my brain gets there should be change, but I mean, there's so much socialization, so much habit.
So you really feel you had a very traditional kind of what I would call man box upbringing.
Definitely.
Okay, so it's like you be the man, and this is what it looks like, and
so
you had to. Okay.
Yeah, so I had 25 years of okay, it's done this way, and then I'm trying to change it and switch it to saying, okay, we can try these new ways, but the brain wants to, still has this habit, so it would still kind of, then I think, even kind of, I think it's still with me to a certain extent, even that. Okay, I know there's going to be change. I'm interested in it, but I get nervous about it. I get I don't have the education on it. I don't have the I know talking about the hundreds and thousands of years we're talking about of doing it a certain way, and then we're gonna women seem to get that we need support. We need to I need like this and we need, and men really haven't had that. It's kind of
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I know one time when we spoke before, you said that you feel many men are really struggling to figure out how to balance their roles. It's like they've got this notion of traditional masculinity that they're supposed to, fix the roof or do things like that, but they're also supposed to do things in the home and support their wife. I mean, how do you think how do you see that, or how do you hear other men are thinking
Yeah.
about it?
Yeah, I just feel like that men often feel stuck. You know,
Okay.
where they know, okay, things are changing. They know, oh, my wife's working, you
Sure,
know,
sure.
and I should be.
Working outside the home.
Yeah,
in addition
yeah.
to
Oh,
the
I'm
home.
sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
okay.
And so, but yet they still feel like I don't know how to do this. And then, you know, so there's
Interesting.
that on one hand, okay, I need to, you know, fix the roof. I need to do this, but then I also know that I have to learn about these other areas. But there's a real you know, defensiveness there. As soon as there's, you know, something's called into question, or hey, I'm not sure, you know, can we talk about
Yes,
this?
yes, yes.
There's the defensiveness.
Interesting.
There's the shutdown, and so it's a real common, you know, that men get it. They say, hey, and these are, you know,
Even in their heads, they get
younger
it.
generations, yeah. Hey, we want to make this change. Is this I want? But then they feel like I don't know what I'm doing.
So it's almost like men need more support for this transition. I mean, but check me on this. Stereotypically, people say men have a harder time discussing these things, discussing their emotions, talking about it. I mean, does that come into play? Like, how can they get this support if they want to change and maybe their family structure or their wife or something feels it's important, but they're defensive? How do they get that supported? Can they talk about it, or what happens?
No, I think that's part of the problem is they want to make this change, but because of socialization, they weren't really taught about emotions and being able to talk about feelings, and so they're stuck in this, you know, this place that it is difficult once the, you know, and it would often kind of the dynamic that you know, and I'll see it in, you know, couples therapy. They'll often be, you know, one person, you know, typically the female wants to talk about emotions, and hey, we need to talk about this issue. It's a problem, and then the male, you know, I did something wrong, you know, and they kind of they withdraw a little bit, they shut down a little bit, and then that makes the partner even more upset. Like, there you go again. You don't know how to do feelings. No men know how to do feelings. Here we go, and then it's just it escalates, you know, and then there's the more of a withdrawal, more of a, you know, they're not able to talk about what that feeling is, and so initially they you know, they know, like, okay, I want to help, I want to, you know, want to work this out, but then they feel that, you know, kind of like, oh no, I did something wrong, and then the defensiveness kicks in, and then it's kind of like, you know, that's not fair. This is, you know, so I see that there isn't a lot of skill,
And I want to say, before we finish, which isn't a good bit, we're also going to talk about things we think people can do. All hope is not lost, but I want to explore this a little bit more. First, there's sort of a stereotype that the only acceptable emotion for men is anger, and it's interesting that you talk about defensiveness. So is that sometimes where men are more likely to resort to anger? They want to do the right thing in this sort of new gender roles world, but aren't quite sure what it looks like and aren't getting any support in culture or from fathers or wherever it's coming from, and then what happens?
And then they feel, you know, it's kind of one thing I try to help men with is just a basic discussion about, you know, there's a primary emotion and there's a secondary emotion. And the primary emotion is a little more sensitive. It's a little more, oh no, I did something wrong. Oh no, you know, it's you're a little more vulnerable. You know, that. And then the secondary emotion comes in as a protection. And men are, you know, that's the irritation or anger. I'm really gonna protect myself with this. And that's what, that. Just describing that to men, just saying, hey, you got your primary and your secondary. And I'm so shocked, like, you know, 8 weeks later when I'm talking to them, they say, you know what, one of the most important things you told me about was primary and secondary. I think about that, you know.
So just that awareness.
So just, you know, kind of being aware of kind of, oh, I have this anger is usually what, that's how I protect myself. That's what I know, but it's more just, you didn't practice. You weren't shown how to do it. It wasn't socialized. So
interesting.
Just giving men, like what to do different. Just saying like, hey, it takes patience. It's going to take some time. You know, this is not, we're talking about a major shift here, you know.
It's interesting when we talk about this sort of the man box and the woman box, traditional socialization, and we often say men and boys are socialized to be dominant. That's sort of part of their, however they manifest it. That's what they're supposed to do, even if they don't really know how. And another part of that socialization for boys and men is don't do anything feminine. We call it the pinkification, you know, and you'll see boys police each other. If anything is seen as girly or feminine, it's like, you know, that is absolutely not to be done. And I think sometimes if that socialization is still so prevalent, which it is, how do we now have men who maybe genuinely want to participate more with families or parent care or housework or cooking or whatever it was, which was traditionally feminine, when they've had this upbringing, which is don't do anything feminine. That's just not masculine. I mean, how do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's almost like it, you know, can take even like this conversation, say for me, you know, it had a little bit of that in it. It's kind of like, you know, hey, do you want to do this today? Oh, this will be a good idea. And then, oh no, I'm gonna be this white male talking about, you know, how, you know,
you, but only
yeah,
a little.
yeah, and then it was kind of like you know, and then it's almost, you know, oh, who does this video go to? Well, look, will my brother see this?
Right.
Will my brother see me talking about this?
It's still there.
It's still there. There's still that kind of like, okay, and then I really had to kind of, okay, let me just feel my feet on the ground, get present.
Right. What does the
what's
quote-unquote
important?
new man look like?
Yeah, what is it, this, and that I'm not this expert, I don't know, you know, all this, but just kind of like, I am willing to just show up and talk about it and have the conversation. And I think the more we can kind of do this together and get like even that, you know, I feel like women need to speak up, women need to have agency, women, and it's kind of my speaking up, it's almost saying, oh, am I saying, hey, but you have to speak in a way that doesn't upset me, you know, or just be gentle when you speak, you know. So it's trying to find that balance and say, you know, because I feel dumb saying, you know, oh, but it's going to hurt my feelings if you, you know. So
right.
just
it
going through this,
all that socialization.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting though that you say that men are struggling with kind of this role balancing. They're still supposed to do traditionally masculine things, but now many feel they have to do other things. Because many women would sort of say the same thing, that now they work outside the home. I mean, that's the norm for women, but they're also supposed to do, whether it's parenting or elder care. So it's interesting that, you know, it's like if we could just have some more conversation, if both sides feel like, we're struggling with all these roles, it's not so neatly divided anymore.
No, I think, you know, having this conversation right here is a good example of it, you know, just kind of.
So let's talk a little bit more about what people can do, because I know we've talked about, I'm an optimist by nature, and I guess I should say also, I feel that, you know, there's socialization of men and boys, which is very important, but women also play a part in this, in that women are conditioned to, I would say, quote unquote, look for traditional masculine characteristics, and so they play a part sometimes in putting men in a double bind. I mean, we've talked about some of the data from things like dating apps and other things of what women are looking for. So on the one hand, they want a very kind of old school, traditional, tall, dark, and handsome, stereotypical man, but they also want a man who's going to have conversations about feelings and help with the dishes and these things. So women also have to adjust their thinking and their expectations, I think, as part of it.
Yeah, no, I see that. And you know, I work with both men and women in my practice, and I see that, you know, I see there's a little expectation of what I want, and, you know, and trying to just go slow with like, okay, we have to be patient with this, you know, this is a new, for you to look at that socialization, that, oh, I'm attracted to this, but then why do I keep choosing the wrong person?
Right, how does this work?
What is it, you know, and then the men the same way, kind of like, oh, I feel like I'm always being picked on, I'm always the problem, it's, you know, and just to slow it down and to be, hey, let's can you be okay with someone being upset? Do you have to fix it? Is there can you allow that to be there without, you know, to sit there? Yeah.
So one of the things that when we talked earlier about what people can do, part of it is that normalize that it's hard, that it's okay, that we are in a time of a lot of flux, and put down our defenses, maybe men and women, put down some of our defenses and our ego. But we also talked about sort of pushing back against the cultural stereotypes, maybe calling it out. So I don't know, you know, about men talking to other men and seeking support, some of those issues.
And that's a tough one too. I mean, these are new territory for men. They do have a hard time with relationships. There's a lot of, you know, how do you know, women, you know, was at a party the other day and they were talking about, you women are like, hey, do you want to go for a walk on the beach? And the
Right.
men were kind of like, I would never ask, hey,
Another
you want
man
to go
to
for a
walk
walk on the beach?
right.
So it's often hard to have those conversations, so to kind of figure out the place where you can have that,
That's
and
okay.
and that's okay, and also talking to family, and like you had mentioned the younger generation. Sometimes I kind of feel like, oh, the younger generations, they got it, they already know, things are changing so dramatically, all this change that's out there, all these terms that I'm not keeping up with, but then when you see like, oh, wait a minute, but some of these stereotypes, some of this, this stuff is still there, even with all this change that's happening, some of those same comments are being made by my 14-year-old nephew or something, and to be able to talk to him about that, and
Well, and Ashley and I talk on another video about the importance of modeling for young people, and I think even if one doesn't have one's own children, that whenever we're around younger people, to really think, how can we model this the best that we are able, even if it's imperfect. I mean, you as a man, or however it is, the relationship, just having those conversations. If you and I can have this conversation, other people can have this conversation.
Exactly, and being able to just open up about that, like about myself, and sharing about myself and my changes and how difficult it is helpful.
So another one that I know is, we've talked a little bit about, is how it doesn't seem like there's a lot of support yet in popular culture for men kind of shifting into new roles. I mean, there's a little bit. We talked about how on social media there might be celebrities or sports figures who are quote unquote girl dad. They're showing parenting, which is wonderful. Again, if they're celebrities. But historically, so much of pop culture and movies, they made fun of men doing anything that was feminine, changing a diaper or something. It was for a laugh. So there's really a lot of sort of pop culture that we have to push back against as well, not just within our own families.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. How that happens, just I don't know. But I do also the benefits, for men to see, and like, wow, like I'm sure some of your statistics on the health disparities, like men just saying like, hey, what is the reason why it'll be important to learn about some of this stuff? And it's like a health benefit. If you can learn how to not be a tightly wound kind of, I have to fix it and defensive, I think that will show up in there's a age, those kind of numbers.
Well, one of the things that I'm sure as a therapist is even though women typically earn less, have less wealth, and less political power, men have far more suicides, much greater incidences of alcohol, violent crime. So I sometimes say to people, men in general have more money and power, but boy, it doesn't always seem to be working out for them. It's not like that's necessarily such a great package.
So somehow to get that message, like, hey, there's someone who is just happier and living longer and enjoying things. And
if we could break down some of those notions, so that I mean, I always say gender equality is actually both for better. It's not like women gain and men lose. It might actually be both for both genders. It would be better. The roles were a little more fluid. I think somehow it might, even though it's certainly a big change. Well, let's see. Is there anything big that we haven't mentioned that really stands out? I guess the only thing I would want to say is I think we haven't talked much about economic forces, but we know our economies are in huge flux. And that seems to drive, especially if you think about politics, drive a lot of changes or feelings. Many of the more traditional male jobs that depended on physical labor do not exist in this country, or many countries, as we automate, manual labor. And so many more service-oriented jobs and jobs requiring skills that women have been rewarded for. So that's something that's outside our personal lives or our socializing, and that's really caused a big change in men's identity in many cases. And there's a great deal of inequality in job opportunity just within men. And I think that's a real legitimate fear or concern, I should say.
Definitely, and for men to see like, hey, this is a place where I can get defensive and I can say, and I, bring back the old days, or whatever. Or it's kind of like, oh, what will, I do think there is, in learning about emotional intelligence, that'll help with some of these, the new economy, the new jobs.
And because we are going to be having those changes. And I certainly hope we don't make it men against women, that we are able to, as a society, find our path together with that. Yes. I can't thank you enough for having this conversation. Perhaps we'll have another at some point.
Great.
I'm Scott Osborne. On my website, which is escottosborne.com, has lots of gender equality resources. And thank you to the Women's Resource Center for offering an opportunity for this conversation. Thank you.